This is the first time I've used Versetta Stone. And while I've used other stone siding products in the past, this is the first time I've used this product. And it's an important point to note that this is a stone siding. It's not a stone veneer. It's not a masonry product. It is a panelized stone siding. And I'm going to show you some of the little tips and tricks I picked up while using the universal corners to make an outside corner, how to get a nice tight fit, how to weave your corner, inside corners, again, using the universal corner panels and the flat panels to do an alternating weave to get a nice line in the inside corner, and some other little things like keeping your elevations lined up for nice straight clean lines, and dealing with things like hose bibs and electrical outlets. So this is a flat panel. You can tell by the black nailing pin and the tongue. So these panels go together in the field. The tongues are alternating, so they mate together. Just makes it a little quicker to install the field. Other point to note is every panel 8 inches tall, 3 feet long. So this is the second type of panel we're using on this project. This is the universal corner. You can tell by the brown nailing fin. Now this panel is designed to be cut in half or better. You can see the outside edge is textured. That is for making an outside corner. The other point to note is the last couple inches of every panel are relatively flat, and that's for making an inside corner. This is the last panel that we're using on this project from Westlake Royal. This Versetta Stone capstone, some people call it a ledger stone. They come in 3-foot lengths. They have a tongue for tying into the top of your panels. And as you can see, they sit on top of the panels, and they really just add a bit of detail, dress things up, and they also add function. Tied in with the flashing, they're going to help shed water out over top of the stone instead of allowing it to flow behind. Don't need a lot of fancy tools for cutting or installing Versetta Stone. I'm using an old miter saw that isn't quite so good for trim anymore, but still had a lot of life left in it. I've installed a 12-inch diamond blade on it, and as you can see, that works really well for cutting my miters, and also works really well for doing the cross cuts on the panels. So the first step in setting our Versetta Stone is figuring out where the star strip's going to sit, and then setting that elevation around the building. So there's multiple ways that you can figure out where that sits. You can use a laser level to transfer it. You can level it around. One of the things I like to do is, I know this building was framed, square, plumb, and level. So I just simply measure down from my soffit framing. So 103 and 11/16. I take that number. I march down to my other soffit. Make a mark, 103 and 11/16. Then we simply snap a line straight through. As you can see, we've got this nailed on every 8 to 10 inches. We've got it tightened up a little bit, but you don't want your nails to be sunk completely home. You want just a little bit of room for expansion and contraction. When your next piece goes on, you don't want to butt it tight. You want to have a little room for expansion and contraction. And if you're wondering why we're not quite right on the line, I don't know if you see a little bit of that deviation there. So instead of setting it to the top, we actually used a feeler block, and we're setting it off the ledge. So the block matches up to our line. That ledge is going to be nice and even. So even though I have a line from our starter strip, I snap a line around the entire building. This is a reference line or a control line. And this just gives me the ability to measure down instead of just constantly measuring up. I have something to go off of, ensures I can keep my ledger stone nice and straight, and any other course of stone nice and straight. Nice, clean, straight lines. And there's a couple things you want to have if you're doing this. Good ear protection, isotunes aware, safety glasses with side shields, an N95 mask is really important. Dust collection whenever possible. Another thing you can use to your advantage is whatever wind you have. So right now I'm using the wind blowing away from me to help carry any dust away from me that is not picked up by my dust extractor. Even though Versetta recommends leveling each panel, I have found that using a control line and measuring to it works just a little better. I'm shooting for 13 5/8 to my red line. I have that over here on this side. And this is why I like to use screws for this application. You can use screws, you can use nails. They recommend at least 4 fasteners per panel, 2 of which are into framing. However, when you're going over top of R9 zip, that's not really possible. So you want to use extra fasteners, but with the screw, you can pull it up that little bit. And I don't get maybe the full 16th, but I get half of that. I don't end up with an extremely open gap, and it's still pleasing to the eye, and nobody's going to pick up on that. Even though this is not masonry, this is stone siding, you can see this gap is not perfect. And this does happen. It's a manufactured product. As you can see, that's not great. And we've got a bit of stuff in behind here. So instead of pulling this panel off, which I may yet have to do if I can't clean this up with a chisel, but that probably takes care of the bottom. This, not the end of the world. And much nicer, much cleaner fit. It's usually faster than taking the panel off the wall. All done, ready for the capstone. So the universal corner is designed to be cut in half. You don't want to cut it exactly in half because you want to maintain your stagger throughout. But you take your offcut from one of your outside corners and you can use it as part of your inside corner. And what you start to do is create a woven corner. This is a flat lay panel with the tongue knocked off. And slide that in, get that set down. And there we have the beginning of a very nice woven corner. So I have one part of a universal corner. These corners are great for inside and outside corners. As you can see, the last few inches are quite flat, and it's designed that way so that it will slide past and make a really nice woven corner. So here's an offcut from a flat panel that I've knocked the tongue off of. That sits in there. And there we have really nice woven corner, nice clean look. Doing an outside corner with Versetta Stone, I've got my piece of universal corner. So I've got my textured outside corner here. And then I come to the other side with a piece of flat lay panel, and they butt together. Now, if you're at all concerned about this joint here, I can show you a real quick, easy way to clean that up. And while you can use a grinder, hammer works too. So you can see the back side of our universal corner has been smoothed so that we get a nice tight fit here. We have our flat lay panel that is cut to fit. Get that to sit in there, and you can see that joint is much tighter now. Cutting around my accessory blocks with Versetta Stone today, and there's a couple little things to keep in mind. It won't always work out, but if you can plan it out, this is just kind of nice. So I've got about 7 7/8 between this stone and the ring. So what I want to do is I want to try and pick a panel that I can use the mortar joint or the size of the stone to my advantage. So I've chosen this panel because I'm going to basically cut right up this mortar line, and it's going to give the illusion of full stones around the ring. You don't want to have a mortar joint in the panel a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch off the side. Sometimes there's nothing you can do to avoid it, but whenever possible, having those full stones around there just makes for a nicer finish. As you can see, our hose bib is completely installed. Got our accessory block in place, little trim pieces behind, which again, you can paint. We just haven't got there yet. And I've just used some GRK cabinet screws to install this temporarily while we're waiting for our stainless steel fasteners to show up. But this is a solid install, and it's just going to be a win for somebody in 5, 10, 15, 20 years when they have to replace the hose bib. They're going to be able to remove this entire thing, deal with the air barrier, and change this out. So once we have all of our capstone tacked on with 2 screws parallel to our reference line, we can sight the entire top of the capstone just to ensure everything looks good and it looks straight. Then we can come back and screw all of our capstone off. The reason you want to sight it first and have a look at it is very easy to pop 2 screws, replace a stone, or adjust the stone in elevation just so you get the look that you're going for, then screw it all off. So we're just finishing the run of capstone off, and there's a couple ways we could deal with it. I could simply just cut the stone flush, but that would leave kind of an ugly exposed edge. So instead, I choose to put this cut edge towards the existing stone, just do a little notch, give us a little detail, a little overhang, but I still leave lots of room for expansion and contraction on the vinyl. And it also allows any water that does get behind there just to freely drain. Literally the last piece of flashing going on top of our capstone. There's no requirement for a rain screen behind Versetta Stone. We already know that. The hydro gap is just strictly a belt and suspenders approach. Should anything blow through any of these joints, there's just additional drainage. Where we're going to get real protection from above is right here. Once this flashing is completely installed and taped, anything coming down the wall is going to hit the flashing and kick out over. So there's no real good way to try and wrap this flashing around in one piece. So it's much easier to do it in 2 pieces. One of the points you have to keep in mind is because you're pitched this way and this way, when you join it together, your tab has to be folded down. Try and get your hems to lock together. A little bit of pressure from the other end, and I'll be able to get that to join up nice and tight.